Our next speaker against the motion is Rabbi Julia Neuberger, who was rabbi of the South London Liberal Synagogue. She's also written many books, of which the most recent is called The Moral State We're In. Julia Neuberger.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you all very much for coming. And I'm rather wondering what connection Roger Scruton is going to find with Methodist Central Hall after Nigel Spivey, as I, as a child, as a member of the West London Synagogue, used to come to overflow services for the High Holy Days here. And for those who know about the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, a fast day for 25 hours, can you imagine this hall, as full as it is now, with us all fasting and the scent of fish and chips slowly wafting up through the floor? So I have strong memories of my father conducting the services as a lay reader and being here. But perhaps that's not quite the meat of tonight's motion. I'm about as liberal a rabbi as you can be without falling off the edge. Nevertheless, I'm profoundly opposed to this motion. First, let's look at how religion is described. For the perception of religion that we've heard is simply one I largely don't recognise. It doesn't seem to recognise or understand the role of religion in many societies where the question of belief takes second place to how you mark your life events, how you're celebrated at birth and at maturation, how you mark marriage, childbirth, old age and death, how we mourn, how we betroth and how we divorce. Had you asked the members of my old congregation, where I was rabbi for 12 years in South London, whether they believed in a personal God, and if so, what the nature of that God was, they'd have looked completely astounded at you. Many of them weren't believers, as it appears the opposition here, or perhaps I should say the proposition, understands it. They simply didn't feel like that. They weren't certain. For them, the idea that you would have creationism taught in schools would be simply appalling. Unlike people who are confirmed atheists, however, they had doubt, they had uncertainty. At some point in their lives, they had a sense of the other, of a different, superior presence within and beyond them, and on other days their doubts were stronger. But they behaved as if they held a stronger belief. They prayed, sometimes with true humility and piety, and sometimes out of habit, by rote, a bit like Nigel's Psalm 23, which is very comforting in times of trouble. They lived their lives according to the seasons of the religious festivals, celebrating Passover with its message of liberation from slavery, each year recognizing its moral message, but more or less certain as to whether it was divine intervention that caused the liberation at all. They marked the Day of Atonement, asking forgiveness for their sins, some years more, some years less conscious of a divine being that would listen to them. At best, they used this as a day to reflect, and the season beforehand to make peace with those they had offended in the previous year. At worst, it was a ritual recital of a recognition that we all do wrong and that there's some value in a day of reflection on how we behave and a form of what I can only describe as spiritual spring cleaning. I make the point to show that not all religion is theologically consistent. Indeed, when the greatest Jewish scholar of the 20th century, Rabbi Dr. Louis Jacobs, Alav HaShalom, was asked to write a book on Jewish theology for the Catholic publishers Darton, Longman and Todd, he insisted that they called it a Jewish theology because Jews have so many different views and so many different opinions. The old joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, isn't in fact a joke, but it's a statement of fact. Belief matters a good deal less than how you live your life. Indeed, the test of the good Jew is what you do and how you behave, and not really at all about what you believe. So one reason I feel so strongly that we wouldn't be better off without religion is that by no means all religion is fundamentalist, extreme, exclusive and damaging. At its best, it's something modest, inspiring and sustaining. The modern division, to my mind, should be seen as that between those full of certainty, who scorn the beliefs of others and have a dogma of their own that allows no real debate, and those who are occasionally full of doubt, but who are tolerant and who are respectful of other people's views. That division is by no means between the religious and the secular. The Crusades, Islamic, Jewish and Christian fundamentalism, fascism and communism are all the results of total certainty. For me, the moderates, religious or not, are the ones who need to unite, and those moderates within the religious world have much to give, to teach, and yes, also to learn. I've lived and worked within modern, non-orthodox, Enlightenment-influenced religious communities most of my adult life. Communities for whom the idea that revelation is a once and forever event is complete anathema, but for whom the idea that we are put into this world with a purpose, however dimly we may perceive it, is a given. With all the passionate rationalism that convinced atheists bring to bear, they miss the experiential, what motivates so many people to do good. It is that sense that we are here for a purpose to make the world a better place that has led so many to social reform that wouldn't otherwise have taken place. It was, for instance...
Christopher, we'll have the questions later, Christopher.
You'll get your turn. You'll get your turn. It was, for instance, religious sensibility that brought us hospice and palliative care. You may or may not share the convictions of those who developed it, but you could hardly deny that in terms of modern health care, the relief of pain of people who are dying has been one of the great advances, one that many really good scientists, desperate to find cures, simply didn't consider. Or take another example, that of slavery, the slave trade and its abolition, the bicentenary of which we're marking this week. Plenty of religious people were involved in the slave trade, and plenty of pretty irreligious people too. But it was the strong religious sensibilities of Wilberforce and his colleagues, largely but not wholly Quaker and nonconformist Christians, that brought an end to the slave trade in Britain. Not soon enough, not humanly aware enough, but as a result of religious thinking from the Puritan tradition on, often profoundly influenced by that Old Testament God that so many people so deride. But they preached, they persuaded, they campaigned, they demonstrated, and they finally got the change through. Or take a more recent example, the Make Poverty History campaign, which had a mixture of people of all ages, races, religions, communities present in Edinburgh nearly 2 years ago, and that has certainly influenced British politicians to give more aid. On those platforms, speaking to crowds of whom many were motivated by their religious feelings, there were imams and cardinals, rock singers and politicians, people of faith and none, gathered together inspired by a cause. The voices of the Hebrew prophets were powerful in the words of the speakers, religious or not, and Isaiah struck a chord amongst people opposed to religious force and form, but passionate about doing the right thing. I'm running out of time, but I want to make one last point, and that's about humility and the religious experience of living ordinary, faithful lives. Working as a communal rabbi, I saw ordinary people trying to live good lives who wanted and want to do the best they can in an imperfect world, to even up inequalities where they could, and to, if you like, try and campaign for social justice. They recognised an obligation to give 10% of their income away to charity each year. Some of them cared for profoundly disabled people, either at home as carers or professionally, giving service because of their sense of purpose. Anything but arrogant, they were bound together by a sense of duty to family, community, and the wider world. They were and are profoundly good people looking for honest ways to live honest, decent lives. In my view, if we didn't have religion, we'd be even more selfish, self-indulgent, certain and cruel, more than we already are. Religious people can without doubt be all those things, but they can at best change the world because they believe in moral purpose, experience a sense of inspiration above and beyond themselves, as many of us do, and inspired by their belief to act. Thank you.